Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump announcing new trade deals after a meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. Details about the agreements on fentanyl, rare earths, and soybean purchases, and why Trump says the U.S. is resuming nuclear testing. Jack Bradley has the details. Millions of Americans will start to lose food assistance benefits this weekend. Will the increasing impact of the shutdown pressure enough Democrats to reopen the government? Luis Martinez on Capitol Hill. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says ICE will not pause operations on Halloween. That's in response to a request from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Jason Blair has more on Noem's announcement. Caribbean communities are surveying the damage left behind by Hurricane Melissa, which claimed dozens of lives. Relief efforts are underway with international aid reaching those in need. Christina Corona reports. And it's day 6 of early voting in the New York City mayor's race. Polling shows Zohran Mamdani is still leading Andrew Cuomo by at least 10 points. Arlene Richards brings us the updates.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. The meeting between President Trump and China's Xi Jinping concludes with trade deals and an ease in export restrictions from both sides. But the details suggest it may be more of a temporary fix than a long-term solution. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
The leaders of the world's two largest economies appear to have pulled back from the edge of another full-blown trade war. President Trump said they agreed to trim tariffs on Chinese goods down from 57% to 47% in exchange for Beijing's cooperation on fentanyl enforcement, resuming U.S. soybean purchases, and delaying rare earth export restrictions.
We have a deal. Now every year we'll renegotiate the deal, but I think the deal will go on for a long time, long beyond the year. We'll negotiate at the end of a year, but all of the rare earth has been settled, and that's for the world.
Is the U.S. suspending that new rule that was put in place that would have expanded the entity list? Export restrictions to any entity that is at least 50% owned by one or more entities on the list for 1 year?
Yes, we are going to be suspending that for a year in return for the suspension on the rare earth licensing regime.
Trump is calling this a one-year deal that can be extended, but it's not guaranteed, as China has a track record of failing to keep promises, including under the Phase 1 trade deal of Trump's first term. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that this deal could be signed as soon as next week, with China agreeing to buy 25 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans annually.
Tremendous amounts of the soybeans and other farm products are going to be purchased immediately.
For American farmers, this could mean some short-term relief, but it remains to be seen how long it will last, as any deal with the CCP is fragile. And the issue of fentanyl came up here as well. Trump says that China will work to stop the flow of its deadly fentanyl into the U.S., and in return, Trump is cutting fentanyl-related tariffs from 20% to 10%. And right before his sit-down with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, President Trump ordered the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing for the first time in about 3 decades.
With others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also. I'd like to see a denuclearization because we have so many, and Russia's second and China's third.
And this is all capped by Trump's trip to South Korea, Japan, and Malaysia, where Trump said that he secured hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. investment. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
It's day 30 of the government shutdown, and there's still no end in sight for the political impasse in Congress. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the latest details from Capitol Hill and the significance of the upcoming November 1st deadline.
On November 1st, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program will run out of funds. Some 42 million Americans rely on the SNAP program for nutrition benefits. Also on November 1st, some 134 Head Start centers, which provide childcare to 65,000 American families, are at risk of closing, forcing families to choose in between work and caring for their children.
All we need to end the craziness, to pay the air traffic controllers, to pay the TSA agents, to pay the pilots, to make sure that food stamp benefits continue to go out to the American people who need them. All we need is 5 reasonable Democrats to join 3 moderate Democrats and 52 Republicans to reopen the government.
Senate Democrats have rejected over a dozen times a continuing resolution to reopen government. Democrats have also rejected Republican proposals to pay accepted federal workers and active duty military personnel.
They are uninterested in doing anything other than jamming their partisan Republican spending bill down the throats of the American people. And as Democrats, we've made clear we will not support a partisan Republican spending bill.
The whip, the number 2 position among House Democrats, says there will be families that are going to suffer, but it was one of the few times, or the few leverage times that we have. Senator from Delaware, frankly, this is our only moment of leverage, and although a very pleasant tool to use.
Not all congressional Democrats agree with their leadership. There is dissent both in the House and the Senate to Democratic leadership strategy.
We're in this position because of Senator Schumer's ineffective leadership. It doesn't mean he's ineffective every single day, but I think we're in this position because the status quo is not working. The old playbook for Democrats is not delivering.
Democrats' latest ploy is, get this, moral outrage that the president isn't stepping in to save Democrats from the consequences of their actions.
The House passed continuing resolution would fund government until November 21st. Even if the Senate approves the bill, there would be another shutdown by the end of the month. Congressional Republicans are considering a longer-term continuing resolution, one that could even last an entire year. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul has declared a state of emergency as federal funding for SNAP benefits runs out. The state will issue $65 million in assistance to food banks amid the ongoing government shutdown. Hochul made the announcement during a news conference this morning.
Today, I'm officially declaring an emergency. This is a food emergency, and I want to unleash every tool at our disposal to keep New Yorkers from going hungry.
New York State receives nearly $650 million in federal funding for SNAP benefits each month. Oregon and Virginia have also issued emergency declarations to free up funds for emergency food assistance. Yesterday, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek pledged $5 million to food banks and declared a 60-day food security emergency. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin has said the state will draw on surplus funds to pay for up to a month of SNAP benefits. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says ICE will not pause operations on Halloween. That's in response to a request from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. NTD correspondent Jason Blair joins us live now for an update. Good evening, Jason. What is the latest from the DHS?
Hey, Tiffany. Yeah, that's right. So DHS Secretary Kristi Noem did respond to Governor J.B. Pritzker's request for ICE to pause operations for the holiday on Halloween. Noem did respond to that, saying that she responded with a very decisive no. Have a look.
The fact that Governor Pritzker is asking for that is shameful. And I think unfortunate that he doesn't recognize how important the work is that we do to make sure we're bringing criminals to justice and getting them off our streets, especially when we're going to send all of our kiddos out on the streets and going to events and enjoying the holiday season.
And Pritzker made this a focus of a Thursday morning press conference. And here's what Pritzker had to say about this.
No child in America should have to go trick-or-treating in fear that they might be confronted with armed federal agents and have to inhale tear gas. I honestly can't even believe that I have to make this plea.
And also, while speaking on Thursday, Noem did tout that in less than 2 months, they have arrested thousands of illegal immigrants in Operation Midway Blitz. The operation began in early September and mainly focuses in the Chicago area. Here's Kristi Noem commenting on that.
Since the beginning of Midway Blitz, ICE and CBP and our state partners have arrested more than 3,000 illegal aliens, including rapists, murderers, and gang members that have been brought to justice. And listen, we don't want any of these individuals out on our roads, and we don't want them in our communities, and we especially don't want them behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler when they can't speak our language, they don't understand our laws.
Noem also highlighted how the department has been cracking down on illegal immigrant drivers, especially commercial truck drivers. Back to you.
And Jason, there is a court case going on involving whether the White House can deploy National Guard troops in Portland, Oregon. What is the latest on that?
Yeah, so there is currently a court case going on. It started yesterday. Oregon has argued that that federal agents are misusing riot control tactics outside of the ICE facility here in Portland, like deploying tear gas, and that the amount of force that agents are using against protesters is disproportionate to the level of violence and criminal activity happening outside of the facility, and that the White House is overstepping its reach in this case. And the defendants argue that the agents at the facility have faced consistent violence from protesters to agents and the building there, and that President Trump has full power to mobilize the Guard, citing laws and past Supreme Court rulings, and it's not up for judicial review. Back to you.
All right, Jason, thanks for that, and stay safe out there. Now that Hurricane Melissa has swept through parts of the Caribbean, communities are assessing the widespread destruction and rising death toll. Relief efforts are underway, with international aid arriving to help those affected. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
On Thursday, Caribbean communities began surveying the destruction left by Hurricane Melissa. The storm has claimed at least 36 lives across Jamaica, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. The storm hit Jamaica on Tuesday as a deadly Category 5 hurricane and is now a Category 2 system moving through the Bahamas toward Bermuda.
Sustained winds are around 105 miles per hour. So Melissa's still a powerful hurricane and is going to be moving very near or perhaps just to the west of Bermuda overnight tonight.
Hurricane warnings remain in effect for Bermuda. Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti were hardest hit, with homes destroyed and utility poles toppled. In Cuba, officials said it is difficult for the country to finance the response.
Due to the blockade and the sanctions, the country is excluded from international financial institutions and also from many global markets.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed the U.S. has issued a declaration of humanitarian assistance for Cuba, pledging aid both directly and through local partners. Emergency relief flights have landed at Jamaica's main airport, which reopened Wednesday. Over 25,000 people remain in shelters. 72% of the island is without power, and only 35% of mobile networks are functioning.
So where we know that schools can resume, we will be doing so on Monday. But a lot of our schools do not have electricity and they do not have water, even in places that weren't as badly affected.
Relief efforts from overseas continued in Jamaica, with the Cayman Islands dispatching a first batch of essential supplies.
We have brought over an initial round of about U.S. 200,000 of key essential supplies. We also have pledged, and I've written a letter signed by myself to your Prime Minister, of about U.S. 1.2 million of goods that we will have, essential supplies and resources that we will have shipped directly to Jamaica.
Bermuda is bracing for Hurricane Melissa, with key roads, schools, and the airport closing as the storm approaches. The National Hurricane Center warns that flash flooding and landslides may persist in parts of the Caribbean as recovery efforts continue. Christina Corona, NTD News.
It's day 6 of early voting in the New York City mayor's race, and polling shows Zoran Mamdani is still leading Andrew Cuomo by at least 10 points. NTD's Arlene Richards has the latest.
As the early voting deadline approaches on Sunday for the New York City mayor's race, new polling shows that Zoran Mamdani still has a commanding lead, despite earlier polls showing Andrew Cuomo cutting that lead in half. 3 new polls were released on Thursday as Mamdani and Cuomo picked up new endorsements. An Emerson College poll shows 50% of likely voters in support of Mamdani, followed by 25% for Cuomo and 21% for Sliwa, with 5% still undecided. Meanwhile, a Marist poll released overnight found Mamdani with a 16-point lead over Cuomo at 48% to 32%. Sliwa trailed behind at 16%. And finally, a Quinnipiac poll released Wednesday showed Mamdani's lead over Cuomo narrowing from 20 points to just 10 at 43% to 33%. But the numbers aren't slowing down the candidates' last push for votes. All three candidates have been making final pitches to voters around the city before Election Day on Tuesday, November 4th. Cuomo picked up a handful of endorsements Thursday, including from former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg, Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi of Long Island, and Republican Hudson Valley Congressman Mike Lawler. Mamdani's latest endorsement came Wednesday morning from the United Bodegas of America. Despite expressing concerns about Mamdani's plan for city-run grocery stores, members now stand behind Mamdani, saying he wants to make the city affordable for everyone. Mamdani has said there's room for both sorts of establishments in the city. Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa picked up an endorsement on Wednesday from the New York Young Republican Club. He took his campaign underground Thursday morning, holding a news conference at the 57th Street subway station in Midtown. Cuomo has been calling on Sliwa to drop out of the race, saying a vote for Sliwa is a vote for Mamdani. But Sliwa remains defiant about staying in the race. With more than 372,000 ballots cast during early voting so far, voter enthusiasm remains high for this election. And with 6 days to go until the polls close, it remains to be seen whether the pollsters got it right. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, President Trump announces cooperation with China on ending the Ukraine war. Arian Pasdar has what the leaders of the two countries discussed. The Hamas terrorist group has returned 2 more bodies of deceased hostages. Meanwhile, thousands protest in Jerusalem against mandatory military service. Jason Perry with the details. And amid an ongoing 26-year-long persecution of Falun Gong practitioners, human rights groups urge President Trump to press Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping on transnational repression and the jailed family members of U.S. citizens. 2 Pennsylvania state senators speak out. That and more when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump announces cooperation with China on ending the Ukraine war. Trump suggesting that Chinese leader Xi Jinping might change his stance on doing business with the Kremlin. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has more.
Ukraine came up very strongly.
President Trump says he spoke with Chinese leader Xi Jinping about ending the Ukraine war. This after Trump met with Xi while in South Korea. According to Trump, the two didn't discuss China's purchase of Russian oil, which boosts Moscow's economy during the conflict.
Sometimes you have to let him fight, I guess. Crazy. But he's going to help us, and we're going to work together on Ukraine.
And the Kremlin reaffirms an earlier warning from President Vladimir Putin, saying Moscow would resume nuclear tests if others do so first. This after the U.S. suggested it might resume testing for nuclear weapons for the first time in 3 decades.
If someone abandons the moratorium, Russia will act accordingly.
Trump says he ordered the Pentagon to start nuclear testing, quote, on an equal basis with Russia and China. And Polish fighter aircraft intercepted a Russian reconnaissance plane over the Baltic Sea on Thursday. The Polish defense minister says it's the second such incident this week. Poland's army had already intercepted a Russian plane flying a reconnaissance mission in international airspace over the Baltic Sea on Tuesday. According to Poland's army, the aircraft, flying in international airspace without a filed flight plan and with its transponder turned off, was intercepted, identified, and escorted out of the area of responsibility. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
The Hamas terrorist group has handed over 2 more bodies of deceased hostages who had been held in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people blocked streets in Jerusalem as they protested mandatory military service. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Israeli police saluted as 2 white vans entered the National Institute of Forensic Medicine on Thursday. The vehicles were carrying what was said to be the bodies of 2 more hostages that had been held in the Gaza Strip for the last 2 years, and specialists will now examine them to determine whether they are the bodies of deceased hostages. This comes just days after Israel released a video they say show Hamas terrorists removing a body from this building, burying it, and then pretending to discover it in front of representatives of the Red Cross. According to the Gaza peace plan, brokered by President Trump, Hamas had 72 hours to return all the hostages, living and deceased. It has now been almost 3 weeks with at least 11 bodies yet to be returned. Phase 2 of the ceasefire calls for the disarmament of Hamas, something the terrorist group has not yet agreed to. However, U.S. troops in Israel are overseeing preparations for the implementation of the Gaza peace plan. And troops from other countries are expected to oversee the disarming of the terrorist group. But Israel has said Turkey will not be part of that force, accusing the country's president of leading a, quote, hostile approach against Israel. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan met with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Thursday and said Israel had committed genocide in the Gaza Strip, but the German Chancellor defended Israel's actions in the territory.
Israel exercised its right to self-defense, and it would have taken only one decision to avoid countless unnecessary casualties. Hamas should have released the hostages earlier and laid down its arms. The children in Gaza, whose fate also touches me personally, have become victims of hostage-taking by the terrorist organization Hamas.
And on the same day, while speaking to a graduating class of military officers, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said this.
At the end of the day, Hamas will be disarmed and Gaza will be demilitarized. If foreign forces do this, all the better. And if they don't, we will do it.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews protested against mandatory service in the Israeli military. And tragically, during the protest, a teen was killed after he fell from a building. Police are now investigating the incident. Ultra-Orthodox Jews attending seminary were exempt from military service until Israel's Supreme Court ruled last year that they must serve. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And the 2 bodies that Hamas returned today have now been confirmed to be those of deceased hostages. Israel says that their families have been notified. Human rights groups are urging President Trump to press Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping on transnational repression and jailed family members of U.S. citizens. The CCP has persecuted the spiritual practice Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, since 1999, but recently ramped up efforts to export the persecution around the world. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Human rights advocates called on President Trump to raise the issue of human rights with Chinese leader Xi ahead of their meeting in South Korea. U.S. citizens and residents are facing increased pressure from the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline guided by the tenets of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Since 1999, the Chinese regime has tried to eradicate the practice inside of China, but now it's aiming to do so here in the United States and around the world.
And so now China figures out how can we send drones in on the training area? How can we bring lawsuits against Shenyu? How can we use the West legal system to create difficulties for a group that simply really wants to showcase Chinese beautiful thousands of years of culture?
At the heart of the CCP's transnational repression is targeting Shenyun, an American dance company that aims to expose the persecution and showcase the 5,000-year culture of China before communism.
It, in many respects, goes right at the philosophical base of governing China. Should it be governed by a continuation of Chinese culture or some representation of that? Or should it be governed by these authoritarian dictators that claim a communism that's not Chinese at all? Communism is completely atheistic. Shenyu reminds them of how spiritual Chinese people are, and that's a complete threat to the Chinese Communist Party that demands adherence only to the government.
The Falun Info Center asked the president to bring up the issue of detained Falun Gong practitioners with family in the United States, and that the CCP end its campaign of transnational repression of believers on American soil. In Pennsylvania on Wednesday, there was a Falun Dafa Awareness Day at the state capitol.
it's just so brutal. It's not just arresting people, it's actually harvesting their organs, the Falun Dafa followers. And to think that the CCP has gone so far that they're arresting people and making money off their deaths is just incredible. It needs to stop.
We have to stand up for what's right. And so I believe that for all of us, we have an obligation to use the platforms in front of us to speak out against oppression.
State Senator Mastriano introduced a resolution to call for an end to the CCP's persecution of Falun Dafa and transnational oppression on U.S. soil. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Will the Chinese Communist Party follow through on the trade talks with President Trump? Robert Destro, former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, weighs in.
Can you trust the CCP? And the answer is no, you can't. I mean, remember, these are people who, if there was a genetic match, would sell your liver.
Hear more tonight on Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Can the Chinese Communist Party be trusted to keep its agreements in the latest trade negotiations with the U.S.? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Do you think China is negotiating in good faith this time around?
Never. I never think they're negotiating in good faith. And I wish they would watch out for their own people and for the world in general, but that's just wishful thinking. And so you have to negotiate with them with that in mind, that they're going to watch out for themselves and their own political party.
They want to bury us economically. I think we farmed out a lot of work there, and they're taking advantage of it, and we're dependent on them. And I don't think we should be dependent on them.
And I believe that as many of the data that comes out of China, it's not to be trusted. And I think that they're in more significant economic danger than they are presenting to the outside world. If we were to completely remove their ability to do business with us, they would collapse.
And do you think there should be a little bit of caution when it comes to negotiating with the Chinese Communist Party?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you have any intelligence at all, which Donald Trump has in spades, he's cautious. He's operating under the constraints and the restraints of our union, which he needs to and should. But as an individual, I think he would deal with China much more aggressively.
Do you think human rights should be kept in the back of the heads of our leaders when it comes to negotiating with China?
Absolutely, I think so. We are a nation that's founded on human rights, and I think that that's part of our fabric of our society here in America.
I think every human being has inalienable rights that should be protected and considered.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think China gives much regard to human rights. I think they prove that and have proven it and continue to prove that. So yes, I think they are the antithesis of the United States.
Now to Paris and an update on the high-profile robbery at the Louvre. Police last night arrested 5 more suspects linked to the theft of crown jewels. Here are the details.
French police have arrested 5 more suspects linked to the theft of over $100 million worth of treasures from the Louvre Museum's Apollo Gallery. Paris prosecutor Laure Becchio said she hoped that would lead to recovering the missing jewels. Becchio told RTL Radio that one suspect was identified through DNA traces left at the crime scene. The arrests took place during coordinated raids across different parts of Paris on Wednesday evening. 2 other men were detained over the weekend. They had, quote, partially admitted their involvement in the robbery. One of these men was attempting to fly out of France when detained. Becchio said a specialized police unit was scouring the black market to locate the stolen artifacts. She said the jewels could be used to launder money or as a bargaining chip in organized crime circles. The heist reveals security lapses at the Louvre, the world's most visited museum, and was seen by many as a national embarrassment.
And Buckingham Palace says Britain's King Charles has started a process to strip Prince Andrew of his titles and given him notice to move out of his mansion. The move by the king comes amid a renewed focus on his brother's association with disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Allegations against Andrew were thrust back in the spotlight since the recent publication of a posthumous memoir by Virginia Giuffre. She wrote that Andrew sexually assaulted her while she was a teen. Andrew has said he's never met her and has repeatedly denied all allegations. Buckingham Palace says the censures are needed, even though he continues to deny the allegations. Early this month, Andrew gave up use of his titles in a move to try to end renewed scrutiny. An act of parliament is required to formally remove Andrew's title as Duke of York. Coming up, food stamp benefits are set to run out on November 1st. Amid the ongoing government shutdown, a federal judge will hear arguments on whether to use contingency funds to keep the benefits going. An attorney and political strategist joins us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A federal judge in Boston appeared poised to order the government to disburse food stamps amid the ongoing government shutdown. Lawyers for 25 Democratic-led states and the District of Columbia are seeking an order to use $6 billion in contingency funds. District Judge Indira Tawani said she planned to make her decision later today. Nearly 42 million low-income Americans receive benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Known as SNAP, the program costs taxpayers $8 billion a month. Starting on Saturday, funds for the program will run out. The Department of Agriculture said last month that contingency funds were available to fund SNAP benefits during the shutdown. However, last weekend, the department said no benefits would be issued on November 1st due to a lack of funds. And joining us now to discuss the fight over funding for SNAP benefits is Gerard Felitti, Senior Counsel at the Lawfare Project, attorney and political strategist. Gerard, thank you so much for joining us. Now, with the SNAP deadline looming, President Trump saying he thinks Republicans will find a way to solve this. How much pressure do you see the SNAP issue bringing on Democrats to push them towards a yes vote on a clean CR?
The SNAP issue is a big source of pressure for Democrats. I think a lot of Americans are becoming increasingly frustrated that the government shutdown is continuing when a simple, at least temporary option is the passage of a clean continuing resolution. And SNAP benefits that affect millions of Americans and imperil their food safety, their ability to get groceries to feed themselves and their families, that is tremendous pressure on Democrats to come to the table with a clean CR and then engage in good faith negotiations for next year's budget.
And as you know, roughly 42 million Americans rely on SNAP. You have the immigration research group CIS estimating that in 2023, among illegal immigrant households, over half of them use at least one major welfare program. And under the previous administration, the number of illegal immigrants rose significantly. First, what's your reaction to those numbers and how this could play out given this administration's focus on immigration enforcement?
I think it's shocking, and many Americans perhaps did not realize the full extent to which U.S. taxpayer dollars were being used for programs that benefited illegal immigrants, whether it was in subsidizing food or housing or education. This is really just the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about benefits for food. And the current administration, the Trump administration, has prioritized removing illegal immigrants from the country and reducing the benefits that are provided to them. Essentially, they should not be in the country. This is the take of the Trump administration. Why are taxpayers paying for them to be here? This is also causing a source of problem with Democrats because one of the reasons that Senate Democrats are not agreeing to a continuing resolution is they want to restore these benefits that the Trump administration wants to cut to illegals.
And in terms of political messaging, we saw a rare moment of Senate Leader John Thune lashing out at the Democrats after a Democratic senator from New Mexico asked for unanimous consent to fund only SNAP but not end the shutdown. Thune saying in part that SNAP recipients shouldn't go without food. People should be getting paid. This isn't a political game. What do you make of the political messaging? Is either side winning on that? And why do you think Democrats are digging in their heels on this issue?
Democrats are digging in their heels as they have done in previous shutdowns because in general, in past shutdowns, most Americans have actually blamed the Republicans for the shutdown. This is different. This is basically a different strategic message that the Republicans are putting out there by offering on 13 different occasions a clean CR, which means that the government would continue to be funded and operating at the same levels as authorized under the Biden era budget, which really no change. The Democrats are refusing this because because they want restoration of money to groups that should not have been receiving it according to the current government. So this is really the issue. Most Americans are starting to be frustrated with the shutdown, but they're not for the change blaming the Republican Party. They're looking at Democrats as wanting to roll back changes that Americans voted for.
And Gerard, we are already starting to see some of those consequences of the shutdown, especially at airports. Give us a sense, though, how bad can things get if this shutdown continues?
Well, the issue ultimately right now is that many essential federal employees, including air traffic controllers at airports, are continuing to go to work, and even though they're not being paid. So services are continuing in many essential areas of transport. And transport isn't just passengers flying home to see their families or going on vacation, but transport also includes the logistics of getting food into stores, of getting products to market. It includes port operations. All of these things are continuing to operate, but people are not getting paid. Now, eventually, this can't go on forever. People who are going to work and not being paid, they want to find work that will pay them. So this will put more strain on the government, on pressure to resolve this budget crisis. But ultimately, it's the lack of funding for programs that will start to cause a ripple effect, because funding goes into everything. Federal dollars flow into everything from food benefits to school benefits to housing benefits. And increasingly, this pain will be felt by Americans.
A lot at stake for sure. Gerard Filitti, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up in the NFL, the Baltimore Ravens are in action tonight against Miami. The big question, though, is whether Lamar Jackson will play. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. In less than 1 week left before California holds a special election, early voters tell David Lamb whether they think the state's redistricting plan will pass. Stay tuned for that when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Early voters are casting ballots in California. Voters will decide on a key proposition to determine the state's congressional districts for the next 5 years. NTD's David Lamb spoke with voters.
The outcome of California's Proposition 50 could influence which political party controls the U.S. House. Voters shared their thoughts with me on Prop 50, but some did not want to be on camera. Do you think Prop 50 will pass?
I do think so.
I think it probably will, because anything that the Democrats want passes.
I'm hoping and praying. It's time to get a grip on things. It seems like they're falling off the edge, so to speak.
Governor Gavin Newsom says Prop 50 is the state's response to Texas's mid-decade redistricting, which could give Republicans 5 House seats.
Overall, we're estimating the voter turnout to be between 50 and 60%.
Gotcha.
But hoping for more.
If voters pass the measure in California and allow lawmakers to draw the lines, Democrats could gain 5 House seats, and the maps would be in effect until the next census in 2030. The measure would put aside the independent commission currently in charge of drawing congressional lines in the state.
I voted no on that, of course, because I just don't think it's right.
Former President Barack Obama has shown support for Prop 50, while President Trump and former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger oppose the measure. States such as Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina already passed redistricting measures that would help Republicans in the 2026 midterm elections.
A lot of other states look to see what California does in order to make their decisions.
In one California city, Clovis, its one congressional district could become 3 different districts. Some have said that California's response is like fighting fire with fire. California's special election day is November 4th. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now. First, good to have you back on sports.
It's great to be back. I've been watching all these World Series games. We may as well actually talk about it now. I've been putting in all these hours sitting on the couch watching those games. So let's make it happen, all right?
Well, speaking of the World Series in baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays have taken a 3-2 lead in the World Series after their win last night. What did you make of it?
You know, I was just telling a coworker yesterday, it felt like the Blue Jays were outplaying the Dodgers, even though at the time the series was tied at 2 games apiece. You know, they did it again last night, though. Dodgers bats were silenced by Blue Jays rookie pitcher Trey Yesavage. Now, he's just 22 years old, struck out 12 batters, allowed just 1 run on 3 hits. Made Shohei Ohtani look very silly there. You do not see Ohtani look like that very often. So anyway, here's what the 2 managers, though, said after the game.
He was pretty good. Historic stuff, you know what I mean? When you talk about that stage and his numbers, getting ahead of a lot of hitters, tons of swing and miss. You know, it's one thing to be in the zone, and it's another thing to be in the zone and get some swing and miss. So slider and split were electric. You know, I said it before the game. It's a different pitcher when he has his stuff. You know, game 1 didn't have a feel for his split, so kind of blown away at what he did.
I think that there's a fight in there. There's a compete that I think there's more in there. I know there's more in there. You know, we've won 2 games in a row, but again, it just comes down to 1 game. So I think that we've been in a lot of elimination games, and we found a way to come to the other side, get on to the other side. So I expect Yamamoto to throw well. But, you know, we still got to take good at bats and play, catch the baseball, convert outs. And we play a good, clean game. I feel good about our chances.
So Game 6 will be Friday night in Toronto. Game 7, if necessary, would also be in Toronto. That would be Saturday night. Blue Jays just need 1 win to win the World Series. Dodgers, the backs are against the wall. They need both games to win. So very exciting right now, Tiff.
Lots at stake. Shifting gears to college football, though, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry said that LSU athletic director Scott Woodward would not be involved in selecting the school's next football coach. Now, this was yesterday, just days after the school fired Brian Kelly. What is the issue here?
Money. You know, I mean, Kelly is still owed more than $50 million after his firing, which of course is a lot to have someone not coach for you. Now, Kelly had originally agreed to a 10-year, $95 million deal when LSU got him away from Notre Dame, hired him away from Notre Dame in 2021. Now, here's what Landry said, quote, "I'm tired of rewarding failure in this country and then leaving the taxpayers to foot the bill." So Landry said the LSU Board of Supervisors will assemble a selection committee to find a new coach, and that if he gets his way, Woodward, the athletic director, won't be part of it. Now, Landry also pointed out there was Woodward who gave former Texas A&M coach Jimbo Fisher the contract that resulted in a $76 million buyout 2 years ago, which is the largest in college football history. But it should be noted that this was a renegotiated contract that happened after Woodward left Texas A&M, though he was the one who hired him. In any case, of course, $50 million is a lot to give someone to not coach for you still. So big money going around in college athletics, but they don't like to pay coaches for not coaching, obviously, you know.
Logical. Looking at NBA news, though, the Los Angeles Lakers officially switched their majority ownership group today in a record deal.
Yeah, the team was valued at $10 billion in this sale, according to ESPN. That's far and away the biggest ever for an NBA franchise. I think the second biggest was Boston Celtics a year ago at just over $6 billion. Now, the Lakers are being bought from the Buss family. Their late father, the late Jerry Buss, bought the Lakers, plus the LA Kings of the NHL and the LA Forum back in 1979 for just $67.5 million. So nice return on that investment. His daughter, Jeannie Buss, has been the team's governor since Jerry passed away more than a decade ago. She will continue in that role as the Buss family continues with a 15% ownership, minority stake. Now, meanwhile, the new majority owner is billionaire businessman Mark Walter, who is already a part owner of the Lakers. Now, Walter is also already the controlling owner of the LA Dodgers, the LA Sparks WNBA team. He's also a part owner of the Chelsea Football Club of the English Premier League, among other things. So they are definitely in good hands there in Los Angeles, as if we were worried. All right, I wasn't worried.
Well, moving to NFL news, tonight's Thursday night game is between the Baltimore Ravens and Miami Dolphins. The big question is, will Lamar Jackson play?
Yes. Ravens coach John Harbaugh said Jackson is finally back after missing 3 games with a hamstring injury. Unfortunately, the Ravens lost 2 of those 3 games. They're now just 2-5 in the season. Now, since 2018, though, Baltimore has won nearly 70% of the games with Jackson starting at quarterback. That includes the playoffs. It's a 74-32 record. Without him, they are just 5-12, so quite a difference he makes. And with him in the lineup, they're actually 7.5-point favorites tonight, despite playing at Miami. Now, the Dolphins are struggling too, just 2-6 on the season. Game starts at 8:15 Eastern Time and will be on Amazon Prime. So be sure to get on your couch and watch that game too, all right? No World Series game tonight, too.
All right, well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's all for today's news around the clock coverage. Visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.